7:38, 55 KRC, the talk station. Happy Monday, and a beautiful Monday morning it is. Beautiful sky, and an exceptionally great Monday morning because I have on the telephone State Senator Shannon Jones from the Springboro area, Republican, and co-sponsor of Senate Bill 5. Welcome to the program, Shannon Jones. It's a distinct pleasure to have you on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Given the subject matter of the bill, which is union reform in the state of Ohio, I had so many people emailing me to get you. You got to have Shannon Jones on the program. We need to get this information out. Of course, every time you have a meeting to discuss this, union employees, of course, inundate the rooms and dominate the, at least visually. And I guess that presents a bit of a, I guess, is it pressure problem on people who are seeking to make some sense out of the state of Ohio in terms of union reform?
Well, I certainly don't feel any pressure by it. I understand, those folks that have an interest in wanting to participate in the process, and they certainly have every right to do that. My concern always is does that activity keep the other side from showing up and participating in the discussion as well. But, I have every intention of having a fair and balanced debate on the subject. And quite frankly, we just have no choice. We have to start talking about the tough issues like collective bargaining.
Okay, and before getting into the sum and substance of SB5 and what it does, and I'm reading a quote like this, and it just sounds to me to be a bizarre, given what collective bargaining is for, which seems to me to be related to what the union benefits are. It's got nothing to do with the unions, the work the unions perform, but it's what their compensation is for them individually. So you got Michelle Pratt of the Ohio Education Association saying collective bargaining helps pursue classroom conditions, the tools and support we need for higher quality education, et cetera. That's a load of horse hockey, isn't it?
Well, look, previously that a lot of those sorts of conditions had been negotiated away by management in these contracts. So instead of just negotiating wages and benefits and terms of employment like you would expect, a lot of times these agreements now go in and dictate student-teacher ratios and building deployment and who's going to be in what classroom. And so what the effect is on that is it keeps management from having all of the flexibility it needs to manage its workforce in order to accomplish the goals of that particular school in this instance. And
it hamstrings them to a pre-provided set of form rules that they will follow in spite of everybody's experience knowing they don't work.
That's exactly right. So it really, what my argument is, look, we know that we're in a time of down revenues. We also know that taxpayers have been very clear, and they're saying we don't want to spend any more money of our tax dollars in government services. You're going to have to do it better, more efficiently. So this is just simply going to give them the flexibility to deploy their workforce in a way that allows them to continue to provide the mission, which is, the quality services that taxpayers are counting on.
Service, how effective the service is, not specifically what they're doing. You can do more with less if you have the proper, well-oiled machine. Businesses all across America are doing that.
That's right.
Now,
well,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, some of the things that under some contracts where you might have someone who's a data operator and their job is to input data. Well, that might have been fine years and years and years ago where there was enough data entry to keep someone busy all day, every day. But now management's got to have the flexibility to say, okay, well, we only need you to do data operations 4 hours of the day, but then we need you to do some filing or we need you to do some other type of office work. They don't have the ability to do that right now.
You're illustrating the best reason why top-down doesn't work is because government typically moves at a snail's pace in terms of recognizing new technology, new developments, and changing business worlds. You can't dictate a business how to run the business when businesses need all the flexibility in the world to move around. Education should be the same way. I just don't see the problem. Now, what is the opposition's main argument, Shannon Jones? What are the unions telling you that, because what you're telling me makes sense. Why don't they like it?
Well, you'd have to get from them what their arguments are. Obviously there's a lot of emotion right now that's laid in it, and so it's hard to discern what what the real objections are. But look, I understand when you're dealing with one's livelihood that it gets really sensitive, and so you got to tread lightly. But
but private sector people don't have this issue. I mean, it's our livelihood too, and I guess I always looked at the fear of being fired for incompetence as a wonderful, kick in the butt carrot dangling out there for keeping your job. I have to do the work that's given me, and I have to do it effectively because, as compared to somebody else, I might get fired for incompetence.
Well, and this job will deal, or this bill rather, will deal with that issue in not allowing longevity to be the driving factor in things like layoffs and so forth. Because, this is a structure that's been established over time that preserves the idea that by staying another year, you get a raise, and by staying another year, you get that much more job security. And what I'm simply saying is we have to have the ability to say, look, we don't live in the time anymore where you just get a raise every year for existing for another year. We have to have a merit-based system built into this so we can be flexible and we can get the best and the brightest.
Well, and I will agree, except I'll go a different tact and I'll say we never lived in a time where automatic guaranteed raises were ever workable, and we are living the aftermath of that reality right now. We're flat, busted, broke. Things ain't going to get any better. State Senator Shannon Jones, can you stick around? I'd like to continue our conversation about what's specifically in SB5 right after this. 7:45, 7:49, 55 KRC, the talk station. Happy Monday to you. Brian Thomas here, continuing my conversation with Ohio State Senator Shannon Jones in connection with Senate Bill 5, which she is a sponsor of. And among other people, I imagine a lot of people are behind this. Before I dive into more of the substance, State Senator Jones, is this something that in your estimation is going to pass given the makeup of the State House?
Look, I hope so. I mean, we're just at the beginning of the process. I gave sponsor testimony last week. We're going to have 2 hearings this week. I suspect there'll be more than that. But this is a difficult subject matter, and so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some common sense reforms, because the thing that everybody agrees on is that we don't have any more money and taxpayers don't want to give government any more money. So if that's the case, and everybody agrees that's the case, we have to figure out how we're going to be more efficient, how we're going to do more with less, because the public expects us to continue to provide the high-quality services that they're used to.
And I get that all day long. And, of course, I think allowing a little bit more market force approach, more business-like approach to anything, including the way government offices and areas are run, is the best direction to go. And I guess I'm looking at something like this as, and you can probably agree with me, I guess, unless you've got a reason to disagree. But the unions presently, and I think of arguing with the city of Cincinnati or any other place where we have collective bargaining agreements and obligations in the form of public pensions, they're underfunded, and our cities and municipalities are at the same time heading toward bankruptcy because the tax revenues are down in a bad economy and things are bad. We've underfunded them all these years. So what are your choices? You either consent to reform or everything gets thrown out the window in a bankruptcy.
Yeah. Look, there is no doubt that there is no panacea out there. This collective bargaining bill is only one piece of the puzzle. Yes, we're going to have to talk about pension reform, and we're going to have to look at Medicaid reform, and all of those things have to be on the table. We are at a critical juncture here, and I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe that, our state's prosperity in the long term depends on it.
Without question, Shannon Jones, I guess tax revenue not going into government, regardless of what rate we're taxed in, is just a perpetual problem in an economy that seems to be going the opposite direction. This is the type of measure, and it's a type of step that is part of a broader picture to right the ship. And I wish you the best of luck. It's like Social Security reform. People who are currently receiving Social Security get all worked up that you're going to take something away from them. But this is more along the lines of on a going forward basis, a different way of doing things.
Change is hard. I get that. Change is very, very hard. And, but sadly, it's taken us to be at a point where we have no choice any longer. And so we have to tackle these issues. I get it. Change is hard. We have to be really transparent with people and do our best to try to communicate with them to kind of tampen down all of the fear mongering that's out there. But look, most government employees do really good work, and they show up every day to provide value. That's not what this is about. This is about how we can do things better and more efficiently, the same things that businesses are doing and, quite frankly, our families are having to do.
And if it's not done, I keep going, the whole thing's going to fall down, and then what are you left with? I mean,
we have no choice. We
right.
have no choice. I mean, we all agree there's no more money, and the taxpayers will pay no more money. And so if that's the case, how can we manage through this? Well, we've got to give us maximum flexibility to be able to manage through this.
State Senator Shannon Jones, I appreciate your bringing this to our attention. I encourage the listeners to show up for the hearings. My understanding is you're going to have a meeting on Thursday to discuss this. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there's a hearing Tuesday at 2:30 in the Senate and a hearing on Thursday at 10 a.m. in the Senate. So, people need to get involved and understand what's happening. This is a really important issue, really one of many important issues that we have to be brave enough to tackle during this General Assembly.
Well, I'll encourage my listeners to get in touch with their elected officials in the state of Ohio. Can I ask you real quick, Shannon, since we only have a minute left, why don't you push for Ohio being a right-to-work state?
Well, that's a completely different issue, and I suspect that will be a legitimate piece of public policy at some point here. But my view is this. This deals with our public sector employees, and that is a separate issue. And, since we all are in agreement there's no more money, we quickly have to give the cabinet and the directors and the heads of local governments the ability to manage their workforce. This is a management tool. They need it. We know that we're not going to be able to give them more money. There's probably going to get less money, so they've got to have that.
So deal with the state level problems first, then your money flow problems before you start broadening the idea of reform out into the private sector.
That's right.
Okay. Listen, I can see the order of things and that making perfect sense. State Senator Shannon Jones, thank you for your time today and best of luck with SB5. On the phone with an update about SB5, that's the union-busting bill, Mike Wilson, Cincinnati Tea Party Mike Wilson, former candidate for government. We're going to give you a successful run next time, Mike. But you were there yesterday?
No, I didn't get a chance to take off work and make it up there yesterday, which I think is probably true for a lot of the people that are Tea Party affiliated.
But we did have Chris Littleton there. He called me
Absolutely.
yesterday and explained to me the place was absolutely wall-to-wall, filled to overcapacity, standing in the rotunda packed with union people.
No, absolutely. And, unfortunately, we didn't have the numbers yesterday. We knew we weren't, which is why we're trying to organize and get as many people up there in Columbus tomorrow as is possible. I mean, we've got groups from across the state that are sending buses in an effort, to show the other side of this. I mean, the unions, it's one of those things where when you go after the public employees unions and try to bring things back in balance with the private sector here, the people who are benefiting from, these very generous contracts and wage and benefit compensation, they're willing to go out there and fight because it directly affects them a lot more than the individual tax burden on every taxpayer out there.
True.
But collectively, we've got a lot more at stake than they do in this fight.
Well, yeah, it's the direct state versus the indirect state, but as you're pointing out, the indirect state is really the ultimate, the overall budget problem and poor business climate for the state of Ohio.
Yeah, I sound like a broken record on some of this stuff, but to me, this is very simply a math problem. Here in Ohio, we're facing a recession just like the rest of the country. Because of that, we've got an $8 billion budget deficit that we're supposed to face in this particular cycle. And what you see is that the private sector has adjusted and compensated. Folks have foregone raises. They've reduced their 401k matches. People have been laid off. Higher health costs passed along to them, but we haven't had some of that adjustment in the private sector yet.
Right, when productivity, public sector, you mean?
Public sector.
It's okay. Productivity, though, has also gone up. So what you're saying is all the host of things that are negative in terms of your take-home pay or your obligations to help pay for anything else, you are also making less because in most businesses they have required people to take on more work for in the same job description and same salary.
No, definitely. And I think the goal of what Senate Bill 5 is hopefully going to accomplish here is give state and local governments the means to adjust when they need to. Right now, because of union contracts and the way things are set up, they have very little flexibility to adjust to changing conditions on the ground. So if you have a sudden decline in tax revenue because of a downturn like we're in right now, local government doesn't have a way to respond to it.
Except to declare bankruptcy.
Yeah,
no, I mean,
I'm here in Hamilton County, unfortunately.
Well, I know, but I say that because this is the cutting off the nose to spite the face, kind of kill the goose that laid the golden egg reality. If unions don't make concessions, much in the same way I kind of make the Mike Brown in the football parallel, concessions have to be made under these circumstances, or the whole ship will sink and everything will go down. Duh.
Yeah, I mean, we like I said, we've seen the decline in the private sector, but it doesn't. I mean, that doesn't give you a sense of just how out of line public sector compensation is right now. When you look at a 30-year career and you compare the median state government worker with the median private sector worker, that median state government worker is going to make nearly 45% more in total compensation over 30 years. The difference between $2.9 million and $1.98 million.
Wow. Well, on that that's enormous. And on that note, Mike, stick around because we'll get more information out of this SB5 right after this. I got to take a break. 736, 55 KRCD Talk. 741, 55 KRCD Talk Station. Very happy Wednesday to you. Brian Thomas continuing my conversation with Mike Wilson, who's bringing us up to speed on SB5 and the group of, shall we say, counter-protesters or opposite-side demonstrators or advocates for SB5. They need to show up on Thursday, of course. Union presence, because as Mike illustrated, huge and will continue to be huge, as it should be. I mean, if you're stake in the game, if you're the one that's going to be impacted, if you don't step up to the plate and make your argument, you don't get an argument, right? Well, that's what we need to do, and that's kind of what Mike's point is. Is it not, Mike Wilson?
No, I think that's it. And, I want to address just real quick, some of the misconceptions about this bill. The public employees unions are, they've immediately gone back to tactic number one, which is parade our police and fire out there and try to prey on the public affection for those people. We love our first responders, and just everyone know that this bill in particular does not change any existing contracts. What it does is it gives governments the tools to work with things and set things down the road so that compensation comes in line more with the private sector. That's really what it is. I mean, we have to deal with the current fiscal reality.
Well,
what we've done for the last 10 years, last 20 years can't continue. We've got to make changes and bring things back in line with what it should be.
And the argument you get, Mike, and maybe you can respond, because I got it yesterday in the form of an email from one of our first responders, who no one loves more than me, because my sister is a lieutenant on the Cincinnati Police Department. I have a multitude of people I consider friends on the Cincinnati Police Department. They're all seemingly really good people who I don't want to hurt, but I do appreciate Mike's point, and that's why I'm behind this. What the point is that many members are making is, listen, this is going to get rid of binding arbitration, and that's all we've got to stand up against evil governments who don't want to pay us enough to do our hard-earned work. But the problem is, and arbitration sounds wonderful in this hypothetical vacuum, but in practice over the years, what happens is arbitrators do baby splitting. They just cut the issue in half. Unions demand, let's say, 10%. The city says 0%. Well, the arbitrator comes along. Let's make it 5. Everybody will suffer a little bit. Well, that keeps expanding the problem. And that's just one microcosm or illustration of the problem. But, that doesn't work either.
No, you're absolutely right. And in practice, to understand there's political reality here, too. Government officials have learned that they can go along to get along this and be rewarded with a flood of financial contributions that helps them get reelected.
Really?
So you have
Mike! You've got to be
politicians that get elected that aren't serving the public interest.
Do you mean that a politician would do something that would cause long-term harm to the fiscal stability of the state or the nation in an effort to get campaign dollars?
Yeah, and you see this through the history of union negotiations. There were a lot of deferred benefits that were put in place, like for example, giving people the ability to accrue and cash out sick time when they retire. So when those provisions were put in place in the 80s, we didn't feel the immediate financial impact of that. Now you have people retiring who are cashing out six-figure paychecks.
Well, I know that, Mike, and I'll actually defend that because the way the system is set up, what I'm going to be complaining about, as I do with the city of Cincinnati, is their failure to fund it. If they gave it to the union people and we could afford to do it at the time and we're still going to make good on those promises because Lord knows people who are getting big fat payouts are the ones that gave up their free time during their work lives. They had something they oh, you mean I'm going to get it later? I'll take it later when I need it. There's nothing wrong with that conceptually, but the problem lies with our corrupt officials who refuse to adequately fund said plan in order to make good on the promises.
No, you're absolutely right, which is why we have to start taking the steps to fix it. It's going to be painful for everybody involved. We understand that, but we have to be responsible and make the tough decisions that weren't made in the past. And I hate that as much as everybody else, but you know, this, I think, I look at this bill as being critical to the long-term future of our state, our ability to get government costs in line, and to make Ohio a competitive place for business.
Which will end up bringing plenty jobs, right? I mean, we do have a beautiful state. It's fruitful. We grow things here. We have plenty of room for manufacturing. It used to be a heart of manufacturing here. It can be again. The reason it isn't now is because we are not a good place to do business compared with a lot of other places that businesses can go. It's simple, it's elemental, it's basic. We need to get our heads around it. Mike Wilson, you're going to be up in Columbus tomorrow, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hearing on this bill is at 10 o'clock in the State House in the South Hearing Room, although I've heard they may change that to try to be able to get a few more people in there. So what we've done is we've put together 3 buses, all right, that are leaving from the old Circuit City parking lot up in Mason, 7 a.m. Tomorrow morning. All the information is on the website, cincinnatiteaparty.org. On the home page, click the link and go ahead and sign up for the bus. We need as many people who care about fiscal responsibility in Columbus tomorrow for this hearing.
Mike Wilson, thanks for the information. I'll appeal to the listeners as well. Get on the bus and stay on the bus. You know what I mean? Have a good day, Mike Wilson. 746, 55 KRC. 751, 55 KRCD Talk Station. Brian Thomas here, and looking forward to right after the top of the hour news. Because as of right now, Senator Rob Portman scheduled to join us on the morning show. Recidivist morning show offender he is, and boy, do I love those. And let's go to the phones like I love my callers. 749-5500, pound 550 on your AT&T phone. Paul, welcome to the morning show.
Hi, how are you?
Quite well, Paul. Hope you can say the same.
I am doing okay.
Good.
I'm actually a state employee,
okay,
and I just want to clear some things up because a lot of things, for instance, one of the things you said where people are asking for, or the government employees have been asking for 10%.
No, it was I didn't use that as a concrete example.
I'm not going crazy. I understand.
All right.
What we've really been doing is asking for like 2% and having back into the TAF. This hasn't been going on just the last 2 or 3 years. This has been going on for the last 9 or 10 years where we've had at least 1 year where pay has been frozen.
Well, join the club, Paul. Everybody's had their pay frozen.
I understand.
You're the one using the illustration, though.
Well, but hold on. I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have to. What I'm telling you is we've been working to keep our costs down for more than just the last 3 years.
Well, don't you feel ripped off? I mean, don't you feel that you have been disserved by your elected officials who haven't adequately funded pension plans to meet the obligations that they are contractually obligated to do?
You're leading me right into my big point. The big point is that people would actually go and look, all these people where they're talking about six-figure incomes, where they're talking about people getting over on the taxpayer, all of those people are the elected officials and management. There are more people making $16,000 a year in the rank and file than there are that are making 20 or 30 or 40. The bottom line is the people that are ripping it off is exactly what you said.
Exactly.
The management and the elected officials.
Without question. And then when you get into other unions like SEIU, you have people that are overlords in there making extraordinary sums of money, living larger than any union member would ever hope to live, and squandering the funds. Why? Because they're the politically connected ones. Exactly. Something fundamentally wrong with this picture, Paul. And I feel for you, man. I really do.
The only thing I want is that people would understand that there is a separation between the people that in government that are the elected officials who are making the bunches of money, and the people that are actually doing the work who are really not making a whole lot of money.
And, in the same category, the public folks, or rather the private industry, private sector, feels it has been ill-served by its elected officials and leaders as well, Paul. So we share some of that pain with you. And Joe wanted you to know, Paul, just so you have a basic comparison, he hasn't gotten a raise, not 2%, not even 0.5% since 2006. And I know Joe, he works his butt to the bone.